Some of the most important advances in modern medicine and technology involve our understanding of our genes. That knowledge offers possible weapons to fight the most deadly diseases. For scientists and increasingly biotech businesses, this is where medicine meets disruption. The big breakthrough came over 60 years ago. February 28, 1953, a major milestone for life science. James Watson and Francis Crick, building on the work of Maurice Wilkins and Rosalind Franklin, uncover the double helix structure of DNA. 40 years later, in 1990, the Human Genome Project is launched. This is a $3 billion attempt, with international support and backing, to map and sequence the human genetic code. In 2001, the results of over a decade of intensive research are finally published, and medical researchers begin developing treatments for a range of diseases. In 2014, a US company, Illumina, announces a major advance. For $1,000, its machine can sequence an entire genome. 2015, a boom year for investment in life sciences, as venture capitalists invest almost $18 billion in the sector. By 2017, the US is leading the way. It has over 6,500 life sciences companies. That's 10 times more than its nearest rivals, the UK and Japan. One of these companies is Intellia Therapeutics, based in Cambridge in Massachusetts. They are developing a form of gene editing which can alter a strand of DNA by either cutting it, replacing it, or tweaking it. It's a kind of molecular scissors. Scientists at Intellia are working with a gene editing technique called CRISPR-Cas9, which they believe could be especially effective at targeting disease. It's a development which could revolutionize healthcare.
What makes CRISPR-Cas9 a breakthrough technique, it's really the simplicity of the technology, the fact that it's easily programmable to target virtually any pieces of DNA in any cell and organism.
What also makes the CRISPR-Cas9 technique attractive is that it's not expensive, meaning even more potential patients could benefit.
So the simplicity of the system, the versatility of the system, in the sense that the system is also harnessed not only to modify DNA in different ways, but also to modify the expression of the DNA and to also target the intermediate molecule between DNA and protein that is called RNA. And it's a cheap technology, and it's easy to design for the biologists in the lab.
It's a technology that has considerable potential because it could enable researchers to disable the genes that cause disease. This is how it works. Inside every organism are long strings of DNA. What CRISPR does is target a specific faulty gene, and at that point it cuts the DNA strand. A cell then repairs the damage, and the faulty gene is disabled. Intellia Therapeutics is one of several biotech firms and research groups developing the CRISPR genome editing technique.
You can think of it as a pair of scissors that allows you to cut DNA, and it has a zip code or a postcode that allows you to target it to specific regions of the DNA. So if you change the postcode, you can actually direct it to different regions of DNA.
There are many potential applications of gene editing in medicine. Researchers believe it could help treat thousands of different genetic diseases, including cystic fibrosis, heart conditions, and several cancers.
The technology affords itself to develop personalized medicines, where we actually are able to personalize the therapeutic for you based on your genetic sequence.
The company is working on experimental therapies, including treatment for liver disease and cancer. But this whole sector is highly competitive, and Intellia is yet to make any money. Despite this, investors are certainly interested in its long-term potential. There is some way to go yet. Gene editing technology still needs years of research before it becomes an everyday tool in medical treatment. CRISPR-Cas9 is not the only genome editing technique. Other methods are also being pioneered. It's an area of research linked closely to controversy. One issue it immediately throws up is the question of designer babies. That's why critics argue that there needs to be much more regulation in place to stop it being abused.
Our view is this technology should only be developed right now in somatic cells. They're cells that stay within you as the individual for your life, but is not passed on to your children. Any discussion about germline editing where those cells or those edits get passed on to your children and their children's children is premature. We should not be using this technology right now for that.
The hope is that genome editing will give scientists a valuable modern technique to fight many diseases, including cancer. Although there's a long way to go, cancer is the area that could become a serious game changer. There are over 200 different forms of cancer, and they can attack virtually any of the body's tissues. This is what makes it one of the most difficult diseases to treat. But there's one emerging technology being used to fight cancer, which uses the patient's own immune system.
I got sick with cancer and nothing worked, so they had to give me T cells and it worked. And now I'm 5 years cancer free.
Broadly speaking, 10 years ago, I don't think anybody thought that you could productively use the immune system to fight cancer. Now, I think most doctors would agree that in addition to chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery, this is the fourth thing, immunotherapy. That's a huge difference.
Why harness the immune system? Well, because the immune system is exquisitely specific, and over hundreds of million years of evolution, what it has learned and what it can do is target bacteria and viruses very specifically without targeting normal tissue.
Immunocore is just one of the companies working in the field of immunotherapy. What it makes use of is something called T-cell receptor technology, or TCR for short. Immunocore's ImmTAC molecules specifically recognize cancer cells and then act like a beacon to a patient's own immune system. The molecules recruit T cells, a type of white blood cell, and these have the ability to kill the cancer cells. Immunocore is running clinical trials for a form of adult eye cancer called uveal melanoma. In around half of all patients, it will eventually spread beyond the eye, most commonly to the liver, and at that point, the prognosis is poor.
Having an effective treatment would be a revolution for us, because when you get diagnosed with something like this, which is extremely rare and extremely dangerous, it transforms your whole outlook if you know that there's at least something you can do.
Immunocore has completed the first phase of drug trials, and the early data are positive. It's now recruiting for a second stage of trials, but the company is still some time away from having a finished product. Developing a drug and getting it onto the market is always a long process, and it's hugely expensive.
It's that cost of development which can, reach hundreds of millions of pounds, even £1 billion or $1 billion US, really requires a huge amount of investor support to see those scientific discoveries in labs get into the real-world clinical setting.
One company that did recently succeed in getting drug approval is Novartis. They're using a different kind of immunotherapy, and it's called CAR-T. They use a drug called Kymra to treat children and young people with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. At the moment, the treatment costs almost $500,000, and it's only used in a few clinics in the United States.
I just kept fighting and I never gave up.
Although it's still early days, scientists believe immunotherapy holds real hope for cancer patients.
I'm excited about leveraging the immune system to target cancers. I feel very strongly that we're going to be seeing more and more examples of this over the next 2 decades, and increasing successes across previously untreatable cancers.
Sequencing our DNA is beginning to have a real impact in how we fight one of the world's most deadly diseases, malaria. There are several forms of the malaria parasite, and they are extremely clever at outwitting treatments. This is because they're constantly changing and mutating. But a new small DNA sequencer could change all of that. It could give scientists and medical staff in the frontline fight against malaria the chance to stay one step ahead. This is one of the most remote parts of Indonesia, and here malaria is still a major health problem. Every year across the world, it kills almost 500,000 people. At this clinic, parents are having their children tested for the disease using a simple blood test. The insects that carry the malaria parasite are mosquitoes. There are several different strains of malaria, and what makes it so deadly is that some of these are resistant to drugs. But scientists are now trying out a new device called the MinION, which was developed by Oxford company Nanopore. MinION is a portable sequencer that reads DNA patterns.
One of the best applications of the MinION sequencer is for the tropical diseases. Usually the patients cannot wait, especially when infected with the dangerous pathogens, infectious diseases.
The MinION is about the size of a mobile phone and simply plugs into a laptop. It analyzes the DNA of the malaria parasite, and that means researchers can pinpoint what strain of the disease they are dealing with. That gives the medical authorities the chance to work out which drug is going to be the most effective.
We started the analysis with malaria parasites and dengue viruses and the tuberculosis bacterium for the drug resistance mutations.
While there are more accurate sequencing technologies available, Professor Suzuki believes the MinION is a genuine game changer. Because it's relatively cheap and it's mobile, it's easy to carry around. This is especially useful in developing countries.
They can buy the MinION because the initial cost is lower. It's no more than $1,000.
The MinION reads the precise order of the tiny DNA components, so it can be used to sequence the DNA of any organism. Scientists are looking at how it could be used to improve the diagnosis of other illnesses.
There's many sequencing technologies. This is the first one that we can realistically take out of the lab and use in a field setting. The second thing about it is it gives us information in real time. So within a couple of minutes of starting a sequencing run, we're starting to get information about the species that we're sequencing. It means that this best level of personalised medication is not just available to people who are in reach of a teaching hospital, but is available to everybody, everywhere. That's what makes it a disruptive technology.
This rapid advance in our understanding of the genome could be a critical turning point in the development of modern medicine. According to some experts, the breakthroughs by biotech companies and the eagerness to invest in them means we're closer than ever to curing diseases, and not just the symptoms. We're about to enter a world where personalised medicine, tailored to individual genomes, could become part of everyday patient treatment.